It's been a very good year. I feel a little bit more confident than I did when I was very first elected in 2016. I think it's fair to say the first 6 months, first year, is a very steep learning curve. As much, despite the amount of experience you can bring into the Parliament, you still have to learn an incredible amount of stuff, especially about dealing with constituency, about the amount of stuff you have to read, you have to understand, and then tabling questions, etc., and working within the government system and the department. I found it more difficult. I think in the last few months I've realised that it can be mentally tiring as well, because you're taking on so much, but you can't relay that to a constituent, because if a constituent rings you at 9 o'clock at night and asks for help, you can't tell them, oh, I'm sorry, I'm tired. You don't. You have to deal with that call. You've got to try and help them the best you can. And I absolutely over the moon. Every time a constituent contacts me, I will try my best. And I think since being elected, I've dealt with nearly 400 to 450 inquiries from constituents. I also work on a number of committees. I think we're just about to report on accommodation for vulnerable young adults. And based on my own past of being in care and having to go through that system of a cliff edge of just being put somewhere and not putting in the right form of accommodation, then it's one of the most proudest moments to sit on that committee. No, I've been very rigid with my manifesto. I think I've made one mistake, and I've already highlighted that publicly. That was just because there was amendments upon amendments upon amendments, and then the time I realised I had made a slight mistake with one vote. No, I have a copy of my manifesto sat on my desk, and I read it so often just to make sure that I'm absolutely very clear of what I promised my constituents back in 2016, that those promises are fed through to a department level and then into the Parliament as well. Well, a lot of them was a lot of improvements, safety in our roads in Onken. I think that's been happening. A full review of our infrastructure in Onken. I mean, with regard to social housing, I'm still pushing to have fairness in respect of the rent system, to make sure that rent levels are being set with a full, clear understanding of a tenant's ability to pay. I'm very passionate about that. I've been passionate about that since 2012 when I was first elected as a commissioner. One thing I'm very passionate about is engaging with constituents and the wider Manx public to ensure that they know, what I do as an MHK, but more importantly, where I sit on topics, but more importantly, that I actually listen to what the public is saying and to feed that back into the decisions that I have to make on their behalf. To what I said in 2016 was that MHK should engage better with the public. They need to explain how they work. They should listen to what the constituents are saying, which is what I've dealt with, but at the same time making sure that decisions are made for the right reason at the right time, and it's based on evidence, and then to explain that back. So yeah, I've not changed. It's fair to say I've not exploded the world, but most MHKs don't need to do that. What they do need to know is that if a constituent needs you, you are there. You will look at their situation. You will help them, making sure that those decisions are actually made for the right reasons. I still think it needs work. I think we have a duty as MHKs and MLCs, all members of Tynwald, is to explain to the Manx public why and how a decision is reached. And myself, as I've said, I've done that since June 2016, when I shared my experience of standing for the House of Keys. I was then asked to provide a blog of actually detailing what an MHK actually does, and I've done that every week since September 2016. I publish a blog, and that tells people what time of day I start, what time I finish, what are the highs, what are the lows. So it's something that in 2021, and somebody said, well, if I decide to stand again, people turn around and say, well, what have you actually done? What have you done, Rob, for me? And I can say, well, all the information's there. Feel free to have a look. I'm very, very excited. I'm very proud that David Ashford, as Minister, listened to my concerns with regards to the patient transfer and increased the accommodation level. That's a massive boost. Now, we've got to remember that people pay for that accommodation and claim the money back. Now, if you haven't got it, It's incredibly difficult at a time when you're already concerned about having to go across to have treatment. So these are small changes, but they're massive changes for the patients involved. Well, I think we're going to be looking at climate change. We're going to be looking at Brexit. There's a lot of things. Personally, we're going to keep developing the likes of the tourism model. We have a new agency board set up, so I'm very proud to be associated with that. I'm very proud to be associated with the motorsport team, and we obviously have our committee as well, committee work. So not every MHK needs to change the world with massive big motions. Most MHKs, what they need to do, and I feel this is what is happening in this administration better than it did in previous administrations, and that is making sure that the decisions that are being made are actually being made based on the evidence. People are reading the correspondence, they're actually making the decisions based on the evidence presented. You don't see these in this administration, the big block votes. You do see resistance from MHKs. They do question a decision, the decisions being made. But I think as an administration, I think this administration is working more professionally than the previous administration.